I've got to say, after complaining about him bitterly for what seems like eons, Vashi, to see Guilbeault removed from environment warms my little conservative heart. I got to say, I think that's a good move for the country, and I think if we want to get pipelines and things like that built, Guilbeault has been a huge impediment. The government as a whole, I think, has been an impediment, but I think Guilbeault in particular has been a real ideologue around that. So I'm not sad to see him moved out of that portfolio.
Well, folks, unfortunately, I don't think Steven Guilbeault's new portfolio is going to benefit us at all because he's now the Minister of Canadian Culture and Identity, Parks Canada, and Quebec's lieutenant. And this actually is a position that he's been in before because under this new title of his actually is Canadian Heritage. Steven Guilbeault, as Minister of Canadian Culture and Identity, previously, that file had been known as Canadian Heritage, which remains the name of the sprawling department that administers everything from arts and community funding to the mandate CBC, Radio-Canada, and official languages. Now, the significance of this is when he was the Heritage Minister back in 2020, 2021, he actually was the one who tried to implement Bill C-10, which was sort of a censorship bill in a sense, where it states, the bill's basic aim is to modernize the Broadcasting Act and bringing some of the major streaming sites, such as YouTube and Netflix, under the same sort of Canadian content regulations that govern traditional broadcasters. It would, for instance, ensure that those American platforms pay fees into the fund for Canadian producers. It also would have ensured that content being made on the platform to be pushed forward had to be more Canadian. Now, luckily, this bill was brought down, but if it wasn't, content like mine might be throttled down because, say my name of the channel, Portuguese Pie. Doesn't sound too Canadian unless you've actually been here for a while. You know that I'm Canadian Portuguese, but your homepage of your YouTube channel or YouTube account would be throttled in terms of what they deem is Canadian content and not Canadian content. Now, again, luckily this got shut down, but outside of this, he's now also Parks Canada. And listen to what Pierre had to say when this was announced.
Steven Guilbeault, for example, the radical anti-development activist twice arrested for climbing buildings illegally to block resource projects, a self-described, and I quote, socialist, has been promoted to be the minister responsible for all of Quebec, but also responsible, according to Mr. Carney, for nature. That means nothing will get built anywhere in Canada because he will be standing in the way.
Well, it definitely seems like that might be the case because we already know how the leaders in Quebec feel about pipelines. We now have this radical environmental activist in control of Parks Canada as well as the Quebec lieutenant. Who's to say he doesn't put extreme roadblocks or delays into the development of pipelines? The Liberals, after all, have been against pipelines for the past 9-10 years. Now all of a sudden they're pro-pipeline, but they put this guy in that portfolio. Doesn't make much sense to me. But none of the other ministers seem like they know what they're doing either. Just take a look at this interview that Vashi did with Francois Philippe Champagne yesterday, who's the new finance minister. He's saying that they're going to invest more, but they're also going to save money and cut things. It just doesn't make any sense. And she grills him over and over, and he can't answer a single time.
Prime Minister, it's a pleasure to see you again, and congratulations on your new portfolio.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate it.
A new era of fiscal responsibility in the country.
I'm glad that you're bringing that up because
Yes.
I have a number of questions about what exactly that means. But I want to start off on the premise of your government now backing away from the carbon tax. You stood alongside former Prime Minister Trudeau for years in cabinet as a parliamentary secretary defending the premise behind the carbon tax. Why should Canadians believe you now that you're really, really not going to use it?
Well, you know, the Prime Minister signed an order today. You've seen that. But I would say the worst thing we could do is not to change our approach when the world is changing. The world has changed massively in the last 6 weeks. I mean, you've seen our closest ally and partner turn its back on us. Geopolitics is changing. So in line of the change in the world, I think Canadians expect us to be pragmatic. You know, you look at what you were doing. We're still very committed to do a number of things for climate change. I still believe this is really the issue of our generation, of our lifetime. But at the same time, there's different ways to do things. I think the Prime Minister spoke during the campaign, and today he signed an order. But I would say it's just a reflection of how we have to adapt to a fast-changing world. People at home understand how things have changed in 6 weeks. It's almost unprecedented. So we're pragmatic. We're changing our approach. We still focus on reducing carbon. But at the same time, we're taking a different approach.
I guess with all due respect, though, I would ask, like, didn't Canadians want you to be pragmatic 6 months ago or a year ago? Is this just a naked political decision to remove this issue as a point of cleavage between the Conservatives and yourself?
I would say the world has changed. Let's not forget. I mean,
about a carbon tax?
Well, I'd say.
Yeah, Francois, can you explain that to us? How in the past 6 weeks the carbon tax has changed instead of the past 7, 8, 9 years that people have been talking to you about that? Please explain that to us, because it doesn't make sense. You guys have been for carbon taxes. You keep telling us everybody gets more with it. Then you get rid of it, and then you're on air saying people are going to have more money in their pocket. We covered that the other day in a video.
What's the status of the carbon tax?
Well, listen, the Prime Minister signed an order today. I think he was pretty clear. And I think it's good news for Canadians. It's more money in their pocket. And
it doesn't make any sense. Now, he's just going to go on for another little bit with some rambling and word salad, but I'll skip to the part where she again questions him more and more. But what is it that you're going to be cutting? Because you're saying you're going to be investing and you're saying you're also going to be saving money. How can you be doing both without actually cutting something?
Speaking of change and different framing, you mentioned you started off, you're the finance minister now, you talked about fiscal responsibility. And I'm hoping that you can help me understand the math, because during the leadership campaign, Prime Minister Carney talked about maintaining transfers to individuals and provinces, keeping dental care, pharmacare, child care, accelerating defense spending, yet somehow balancing the budget in a three-year time frame. How does that add up? And what are you going to cut to get there?
We're going to do things differently. Like I said, it's a new era of fiscal responsibility. This is a completely new era in Canada. We have been clear, we're going to spend less, we're going to invest more. We're going to build Canada of tomorrow. There's nothing that you will see that will surprise Canadians that at a time like that, we need to invest massively in ourselves, in our industries, in our defense, in our industries across the nation, and workers. So we're going to say there's a difference between spending and investment. So that's going to be the first frame we're going to present to Canadians, that, for example, when you have structural investment that are going to make our country more competitive, we're going to present a financial statement, if you want, where you will see the spending and the investments. And I think folks at home understand, when you go to the grocery and buy, you're spending. When you invest in a house, when you buy a house, you're investing.
It's still a debt load to me, though. Both of those things weigh on my debt load.
One is that you're buying an asset that is going to be there for generations. I'll give you an example. When we have the high-frequency rail now, or the high-speed rail, well, that's an asset we're going to have for at least 100 years, if not beyond, like when we build this railway across Canada. So now is the time to invest in ourselves,
Even if I accept the framing that you're positioning versus investment versus, spending, program spending has accelerated under your government's watch. What will you, to be blunt, spend less on? Because nobody has been explicit about how you're going to accomplish fiscal responsibility.
Well, as you know, this is hours since I've been appointed.
I know, but you're here. I got to ask.
I appreciate
and the campaign went on for 6 weeks.
I'm sure we'll have other opportunities to be together, it seems.
Now, this sneaky little rat tries to use the excuse that he's only been the finance minister for 6 hours. Yet, as Vashi points out, you've been campaigning on this for the past 6 weeks. Mark Carney has been saying that this is what he's going to do. You knew that if you were going to be part of his cabinet. So what's the plan? And she holds him to this. She just kind of brushes by that, saying like, yeah, 6 hours. Who cares? Tell us what you're cutting.
But this is really the frame. You spend less, you invest more. And I think that's
But what
the
are
frame.
you spending less on? And I take it that you're just
Yeah.
new to the job, but Mr. Carney has made this a central plank of not only his leadership campaign, but what he said after his swearing in as well. Priority 2 will be to grow the economy and spend less, he said explicitly.
Totally.
Canadians would ask me to ask conservatives who present the same position the same question. Well, what are you going to cut back on that I rely on at this moment in time?
Well,
The math doesn't add up.
I think it's a very different frame. One is one of negativity. You know, when you've heard the conservative, it's all about negative thing. I'm talking about an ambitious Canada, about a Canada that invests in itself, that is going to make significant change to prepare our economy for one of its biggest challenge in our century.
But you're both talking about fiscal responsibility.
Listen, and we're going to be transparent. We're going to work with the parliamentary budget officer when it comes to what goes in expenses, what goes in investment. We're going to be very transparent with Canadians. But
Guys, did you hear that? The new liberals are going to be transparent with Canadians, not like those so-called old Trudeau liberals who said that they were going to be transparent. No, nothing like them. We're going to be transparent now with Canadians about how the money is being spent. This guy is just out to lunch, and Vashi, again, does not stop. She questions him again.
And I think, look, I'm not taking away from that message. I think the message of ambition is one Canadians share, particularly at this moment of time. And the impetus for it could not be more crystal clear thanks to what's unfolded after the last 6 weeks. But Mr. Carney has said, I'm going to spend less. You have said, I'm going to spend less. You can't answer on what you're going to spend less on. Is it the public service? Are you going to cut the public service?
like I said, we're 6 hours since the moment I've been sworn in. So
in principle, are you open to cutting the public service?
Listen, I love the public servant. I think they've done great service for Canadians. We're going to look at the books. We're going to be, it's more about the approach. When I say this is the era of fiscal responsibility, I think people understand what it means. We're going to be looking. I'm going to be like a hawk in the spending to make sure that whatever we have to do to protect the country. On the other end, I'm very much focused on the other side of the equation, which is the investment, because you either spend less or you invest more at the same time to grow the economy. So my mission is to make sure that we build the economy for resiliency, to have a strong economy, and the Prime Minister said the strongest economy of the G7. So I've never been more confident. Honestly, despite adversity, I think we're going to come out of that stronger than ever.
Again, guys, did you catch that? This is now the era of fiscal responsibility. Again, with the new liberals, not the old Trudeau liberals who said that they were going to balance the books. They were going to have 3 that were unbalanced and then the rest would be balanced, yet they never balanced one budget. Not one book balanced itself as Trudeau said it would. Yet now we're supposed to believe that is the era of fiscal responsibility. These guys must think that we're asleep. I don't know. It's mind-boggling that these guys can just go out there and spew the stuff that they're spewing. And he wasn't the only minister. We also had Anita Anand with Rosemary Barton doing all this fear-mongering, talking about this is wartime. Take a listen.
Anita Anand is part of Carney's new cabinet. She now takes on the role of Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry. I spoke to her about the challenges the government is facing and the work she hopes to get done. Minister Anita Anand, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Rosie.
So you're in this new portfolio, Innovation, Science and Industry. It seems to me it's a big job and a critical portfolio at this moment, given what is happening, the threats from the United States. But tell me why you think this job matters in particular right now.
We're in a wartime footing right now, Rosie.
So Anita claims that we are in a wartime footing, but the question is actually, why is that the case? What have the Liberals done to prevent that from being the case? They have not done anything to ensure that we are not relying on other places. Our intra-provincial trade all of a sudden now is top of mind when that should have been something that we've dealt with long ago. Pipelines, again, now top of mind when they've shut down the pipeline or fought against that for many, many years. All they've been doing is investing in social programs, yet nothing else. What about defense, our military, stuff like that? Now they're talking about expanding our defenses and buying local and using only our steel and yada, yada, yada. This should have been something already implemented. And I'm not saying only the Liberals are to blame for this, But for the past 10 years, when there has been movement to try to expand, like going to Japan or Greece or anything like that, who have reached out to us because they want our energy or they want some of our fuel or gas, and you guys have just shut everything down, then yeah, you are to blame. Yet apparently to Anita, when the Conservatives point this out and say, listen, these are still the ministers from 9 years ago, she says that they're being negative, but wants to know what they would do.
You are in a new portfolio, but you have been in Justin Trudeau's cabinet previously. I'm sure you've heard, Minister, that the Conservatives believe this is just the same old Liberal government with a new Prime Minister, given how many people in cabinet remain in cabinet. What do you say to Canadians who are not convinced that there has been a change in direction here?
What I'd like to say to Conservatives is actually tell us what you would do. What are your plans to build the Canadian economy? All we hear from that side is negativity, and negativity is not going to solve the disputes between Canada and the United States on trade, on tariffs.
Now, it seems like Anita hasn't actually been listening to what the Conservatives have been saying, because they've expressed a few of these ideas, but it is interesting to see the Liberals wanting to know more of the Conservatives' plan, probably to take a few more ideas. But now I want to pivot to a panel on Global News where they were addressing how bad it's looking that Carney is reacting to reporters when they're asking him tough questions, especially about his assets. He does not like to be answering these questions, and they kind of give a little bit of insight on when the next election would most likely happen.
Lots of questions about Mark Carney's assets. We saw on Friday he got a little testy when he was asked about that. He says they've all been put into a blind trust. They talked to the ethics commissioner, but we may or may not see the ethics commissioner's report before the election is over and people go to the polls. David, what do you think Mark Carney needs to do to make that issue go away?
Surely you know that on a campaign, you're going to get asked about this probably every day. You want to make it go away. Now, does he want to do that? No, he doesn't want to talk about it.
Well, what he doesn't tell us is how much he's worth.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really the question here. Are you worth 10 million, 20 million, $50 million? We have no idea. Who is the person who's running the blind trust? Is it your brother? Is it, I mean, if you're having an independent person who's supposed to take care of the blind trust, that person should be independent and far removed from Mr. Carney's assets. We don't know who that is. Is he requiring to sell all the stocks, which apparently you're supposed to, but has he sold all the stocks and his investments in anything that may put him in a conflict with the government? Those are things that he needs to answer to Canadians, and he doesn't want to answer those questions. And you said he was a little testy. He does not like tough questions from journalists. He's used to a more compliant financial press when he was a central banker, and they're very much respectful of him. Well, we're political reporters. We have an obligation to ask the tough questions, and that's something we're going to have to watch for during the campaign. Is when he gets angry or annoyed or arrogant at journalists for pressing him on issues that he doesn't want to answer. After the French debate, he was asked a tough question about Brookfield, whether he was there involved when Brookfield Asset Management moved to its headquarters in New York. So you got your facts wrong, buddy, basically is what he said. Well, no, the reporter had it right. And then he had to backtrack and say, well, I was imprecise in my language. I was there when we moved the headquarters, but it's no big deal. It was to take advantage of New York stock indices. But we've seen this constantly with him, is that he's not used to being asked tough questions because he's been a central banker and everybody looks up to it. Well, now you're in the political trenches. I mean, Mr. Poilievre gets tough questions too, and he will fight back at journalists, and he has. But that's the nature of the game.
And I come back to those tough questions that Carney is getting. They're completely predictable. Any half-decent communications advisor will say, "Well, Mr. Carney, here's what. Let me look at the front pages of the Globe and Mail and what was on Global News last night." And you're going to get asked about this, and he has and he has no answer. He has no good answer other than to be chippy about it. When I first phoned around, and I'm sure you were too, Bob, first phoning around to the rebels in the fall, the Liberal rebels, many of them said to me, I would love Carney, but there's no way because he will not want to do the financial striptease that he's going to be required to do. And they were absolutely right. He doesn't want to do that.
We just have about a minute left, but I want to get both of your takes on this. A week from now, are we going to be seeing the writ drop? When's the election campaign?
I think it'll be next Sunday, and David's already packed, I'm told, and you are probably as well.
The go bag is ready?
Yeah, I think next Sunday. He could call it Saturday, but he's definitely not bringing the House back on the day after Sunday, March the 24th. My election date, if you do the math, we're not going to have one April 21st because that's Monday, Easter Monday.
Yeah.
I think April 28th is our
And it is
E-Day.
going to be a horse race. The polls have them in a dead heat.
Now, after hearing all that, we'll see if we finally get some answers from Carney, because as Robert Fife pointed out, David Akin, Mercedes Stevens, they're all packed up and ready to go because they're going to be joining Mark Carney on his trip to Europe, as well as Rosemary Barton. And here's just a quick little clip of them on the tarmac before it was taking off.
Chief political correspondent Rosemary Barton is traveling as part of the press pool, and we spoke to her just before takeoff about the significance of Carney taking this trip at this time.
Hi, Ian. As you said, this is the Prime Minister's first official trip overseas.
Carney is Canada's first unelected Prime Minister in 4 decades and is facing pressure at home to call an election. Our Ottawa Bureau Chief, Mercedes Stephenson, is traveling with the Prime Minister. So, Mercedes, what is the political strategy behind this foreign trip?
Jeff, a big day for Prime Minister Mark Carney. Today is his 60th birthday, and on this day, he is making his debut on the world stage.
So it's definitely going to be an interesting week coming up, but I'm interested to see if Carney's going to pull another one of Trump's moves and actually show him being questioned by reporters while he's on the plane, just like Trump has been doing on Air Force One. I guess only time will tell, but as always, love to hear from you guys. Let me know what you thought about all this in the comment section below. And as always, I will catch you guys on the next one. Thanks so much.